We actually want to get right to Kara Scannell. Kara, do we have a ruling in the Donald Trump civil fraud trial case?
Yeah, we do, Boris. We just got the ruling. It is 92 pages long, and I'm scanning through it right now. But when I'm looking at these numbers, the totals that the judge is ordering collectively in the case, so this will include all of the defendants, I'm getting a total of $362 million. And I'm just scrolling through this now. I can see that there's the dollar amount specific to Donald Trump. I'm going to use a calculator to do some rough math. It gets us to, for Donald Trump, about $354 million. That's for him, the company, the Trump Organization. So very close to what the New York Attorney General's office was seeking of $370 million. There's a lot of zeros here and a lot of other numbers, but roughly $354 million is the judgment against Donald Trump. The judge also found that his son, Eric Trump, is liable in the amount of $4 million. Donald Trump Jr. is liable in the amount of $4 million. And Ellen Weisselberg, the former chief financial officer, is liable in the amount of $1 million. I haven't had a chance to read through the language of what the judge said here, but really this was about the money because the judge had already found that Donald Trump, his sons, and Ellen Weisselberg had engaged in fraud by issuing fraudulent financial statements, giving them to banks and insurers in order to obtain favorable rates. He ruled that before the trial, but we did go through a 3-month trial. The judge was looking to determine how much in ill-gotten gains, is what this word of disgorgement means, the money that they benefited from. So now the judge issuing the significant ruling, more than $350 million against Donald Trump and the Trump Organization and against the sons. Now, I'm going to just see if I can quickly search to see what the judge said about any ban. That was the other outstanding question here. I'm not able to find that very quickly, but that is another issue that we're looking for here of what the judge says about whether he's banning Trump from doing business or his sons. But this ruling, there was a question of whether the sons would be found to be liable because the judge said at the end of the trial, during closing arguments, he asked the Attorney General's team if he said he wasn't sure there was sufficient evidence against the sons. This ruling here indicating that he believes that they did at least receive improper profits and asking them to disgorge that as a result of this case. This is a significant win for the New York Attorney General, Letitia James. She'd been investigating this case ever since Michael Cohen testified before Congress when he made this first allegation that Trump had inflated the value of properties to get better rates on loans and insurance and to pay less in taxes. So she is now justified by this finding by the judge. And again, this was a judge trial. This was not a jury trial. So we've been waiting for Judge Arthur Engoron to issue this ruling. And now we have it. We still have to continue to read through it. Our team is doing that as I speak. But, a real significant win for the New York Attorney General and a loss for Donald Trump in this case that goes to the heart of his reputation, the reputation that he was successful.
The moment the ruling dropped, everything shifted. One signature, 92 pages, and in an instant, the empire that Donald Trump spent decades building was staring straight into a collapse so massive, even his closest allies weren't prepared for what came next. It wasn't just a judgment. It wasn't just a fine. It was the kind of legal earthquake that doesn't wait for appeals, discussions, or negotiations. The judge made it brutally clear. The time for talking was over. Enforcement starts now. And the numbers? They were staggering. Over $460 million owed and growing by the day. Interest climbing like a fire. Bank accounts frozen on site. Properties open for seizure. Not next year, not next month. Today. Before anyone could catch their breath, the state of New York was already moving, targeting the very assets that once symbolized Trump's power, confidence, and identity. And as Trump's legal team scrambled, one thing became painfully obvious. This was the beginning of a collapse he couldn't tweet his way out of. It started quietly, almost clinically. A judge reviewing paperwork. A clerk filing notices. But once the order was finalized, everything unfolded at lightning speed. Restraining notices went out like shockwaves, freezing Trump's accounts at major banks. Chase. Deutsche Bank. Others that haven't even been named yet. One moment the accounts existed. The next, they were locked behind a legal wall Trump couldn't climb. Financial paralysis. And when investigators opened the files on his properties, the picture grew even worse. 7 Springs in Westchester, 200-plus acres of sprawling land valued at over $100 million, was now at the top of the state's target list. Trump National Golf Club in Briarcliff Manor, already flagged. Another club in Colts Neck, New Jersey. The judge ruled that even out-of-state assets tied to New York operations were fair game. Nothing was off limits. Not the land, not the buildings, not the revenue streams. and not the name that once towered over skylines. What made this moment even more brutal was the judge's tone. He didn't mince words. After years of what he deemed delays, stalling, and half-truths, he'd had enough. Trump was warned. Given time, given more time, then given final deadlines. And when those deadlines passed without a full bond posted, the judge pulled the trigger on immediate asset seizure. No grace period, no negotiations, no more chances. But the order itself was just the opening act. What investigators uncovered next shifted the entire case into something far more explosive. Behind the scenes, financial analysts working with the Attorney General's team claimed they discovered something alarming. Suspicious transfers between Trump-connected accounts, money shifting from one business to another, then bouncing again to a third entity. Patterns that looked less like simple accounting and more like a maze designed to hide where cash was actually landing. Rumors began circulating inside legal circles that these movements weren't random. Reports suggest that investigators believe Trump was repositioning funds to shield them before the judgment hit. If true, that would cross into a whole different category of trouble. Judges do not tolerate attempts to dodge court orders. And when this information reached the bench, the response was swift and uncompromising. The judge interpreted the movements as deliberate, calculated, an intentional attempt to dodge enforcement, which opened the door to a devastating warning. Trump could be held in contempt, meaning fines, meaning sanctions. And, if things escalated far enough, the possibility of something even more severe. Contempt jail time, not for fraud, not for political reasons, purely for refusing to cooperate with a court's demands. The idea of a former president sitting behind bars for defying a financial order sent shockwaves through every newsroom in the country. But while the legal world processed this possibility, Trump had already erupted publicly. He rushed to Truth Social with frantic posts accusing everyone, from the judge to the attorney general to unnamed enemies, of orchestrating what he called an election interference scheme. He claimed the seizure orders were illegal. He insisted the courts were weaponized. He said he would reverse everything. And then he went even further, dropping a claim that stunned analysts across the spectrum. He suggested he could pardon himself. He said he'd wipe the judgment clean and protect himself from unjust persecution. But here's the part that shows just how desperate things have become. A presidential pardon only applies to federal criminal matters. This case is neither federal nor criminal. It's a state civil judgment, meaning a self-pardon wouldn't touch it, couldn't eliminate it, couldn't erase even a dollar. Nothing in the Constitution allows a president to override a state court or erase a civil fraud ruling. Trump's statements weren't a legal strategy. They were a panic signal, a public unraveling, and it wasn't the first time. Court insiders recall his courtroom outburst on January 6th, an eruption so intense that security had to escort him out. Those watching that day said something shifted in the judge's face. Patience evaporated. What little slack remained was gone. That moment, they say, planted the seed for everything that came after. And as Trump continued melting down publicly, another storm was forming behind him, one that could reshape his political fate. The asset seizures didn't just raise legal consequences, they poured gasoline on the impeachment effort gaining momentum in Congress. Representatives pushing for impeachment saw Trump's behavior, the self-pardon threats, the financial maneuvers, the accusations of trying to override state courts, as evidence supporting the articles drafted against him. One article accused him of usurpation, trying to assume power he did not have. Another accused him of abusing power by attempting to use the presidency to avoid personal financial consequences. And a third article focused on obstruction, pointing to rumors that he attempted to hide assets or evade lawful enforcement. Lawmakers understood the optics. A sitting president arguing he can erase state-level penalties? A sitting president potentially shifting assets to dodge a judgment? A sitting president posting threats against judges online? It was political dynamite. And with polls showing that 60% of Americans believe Trump should face consequences for fraud, the impeachment momentum only grew. Even a slice of Republicans expressed frustration, not because they suddenly sided with Democrats, but because fraud hits voters differently. People despise financial deception. They despise loopholes that benefit the wealthy. And when they see a former president trying to escape a financial judgment with tactics they could never use, support crumbles. Yet even as broader public support eroded, his core base hardened. Donations surged, social media flared, rallies brimmed with anger, but intense loyalty from a minority group cannot outweigh widespread disapproval. And while all this political chaos swirled through Washington, the collapse of Trump's business world was accelerating. For decades, Trump shaped his public identity around real estate success. Towering buildings, luxurious golf courses, high-end resorts. His name wasn't just branding, it was the product, it was the narrative. Successful billionaire turned president. But now, the foundations of that narrative were cracking in real time. The properties being targeted for seizure weren't fringe holdings. They were core components of his brand. Seven Springs wasn't just a plot of land. It was a trophy estate he bragged about for years. The golf courses weren't just recreational spaces. They were revenue engines, hosting tournaments, weddings, banquets, and high-dollar memberships. Losing these properties doesn't just drain finances, it drains identity. And rumors already suggest that the state intends to rebrand seized locations before putting them up for sale, stripping the Trump name, removing logos, repainting signage, transforming the symbols of his legacy into neutral, anonymous real estate listings. Some insiders say this rebranding could be the part that hurts Trump the most, not the money, but the erasure, the dismantling of the identity he marketed for decades. And the income loss from these properties? That's another hit with massive implications. The golf clubs generate steady cash flow. Memberships alone can bring in millions. Events bring in more. Without that income, Trump's legal bills, business obligations, and political spending become harder to sustain. And while his supporters continue donating, grassroots contributions can't cover multi-million-dollar monthly expenses. The financial strain is mounting, and it's only getting worse. Once the state seizes a property, the clock starts ticking. They can auction it, lease it, or assume control to collect revenue. Every option hurts Trump. Auctions create national headlines. Trump property sold to highest bidder. Former Trump estate purchased by new developer. And each headline chips away at the myth of invincibility he's relied on for so long. Investors swooping in, developers stripping his name, buyers joking about getting a bargain. It all feeds a narrative of downfall, and people pay attention to narratives. But the more dangerous scenario isn't the financial hit, it's the potential for confrontation. There are real concerns among officials that Trump may urge supporters to physically protest property seizures. The idea isn't far-fetched. January 6th proved that a motivated, angry base can escalate quickly. If supporters show up to block state officials, things could spiral into dangerous territory. Any attempt to obstruct a court-authorized seizure would trigger arrests, potentially violence, and would only worsen Trump's legal exposure. But here's the part that truly raises the stakes. More properties may be next. Seven Springs is valuable, but not enough to cover the full judgment. Even with the golf courses included, the total likely won't reach $464 million, which means the next wave of seizures could target bigger icons. Trump Tower, 40 Wall Street, properties so closely tied to his legacy that losing them would be like losing pieces of his own mythology. And while the Attorney General hasn't confirmed their status, analysts say those assets are absolutely on the table. As each day passes without payment, interest piles higher, the judgment grows, and the state's pressure intensifies. It's a financial avalanche, and Trump is standing directly in its path. So what does this mean for Trump's political future? It means vulnerability on every front. His approval rating sits at 37%, and analysts predict further drops once images of seized properties hit the news. Political strategists say those visuals will be devastating. Shots of officials walking into buildings once branded with his name, photos of auction notices taped to gates, drone footage of estates being appraised for liquidation. These images bypass debate. They bypass rhetoric. They speak directly to perception, and perception drives voter confidence. Trump's opponents are already preparing ads centered on this collapse. If he can't manage his own business, how can he manage the country? Accountability matters. No one is above the law. Meanwhile, Republicans who once backed him are beginning to create distance. They don't want to be tied to a man whose brand is shifting from powerful to desperate. And Trump feels that political isolation creeping in. His recent public behavior reflects it. More late-night posts, more frantic claims, more attacks on institutions, more promises to reverse reality with authority he doesn't actually have. It's the behavior of someone watching the walls close in, someone who knows he's losing not just assets, but influence. This judgment isn't just a financial blow, it's a psychological one. Trump has always anchored his identity to wealth. I'm rich, I'm successful, I'm a winner. But what happens when the empire that built that persona begins dissolving piece by piece? What happens when the name meant to signify prestige becomes synonymous with seizure notices, auction signs, and legal defeats? Rumors suggest those close to him say he's more rattled now than during any previous legal crisis. More agitated, more volatile, more unreachable. Some claim he's not sleeping. Others say he's refusing strategy meetings. Whether true or not, the chaos surrounding him is undeniable. And while all this unfolds, the interest on his judgment continues to climb, adding thousands every single day. Every hour of delay is costing him money he no longer has. He is, for the first time in his public life, facing the genuine possibility of losing everything he built his identity around. The collapse of a financial empire isn't sudden, it's erosion. It starts with one order, one freeze, one seizure, but then it accelerates. Revenue dries up, debts rise, properties vanish, brand value implodes, and once momentum shifts, it becomes almost impossible to stop. That's the stage Trump is in now. The stage where outcomes don't depend on strategy or defiance, but on math. And the math is devastating. If these seizures continue, and every sign suggests they will, Trump may soon face the unthinkable. A future where the properties that once defined his empire belong to someone else. Where the wealth he touted evaporates into legal fees and compensations. Where the brand he cultivated no longer commands loyalty. And where the presidency, the final position of power he still holds, becomes the only thing left keeping him afloat. But even that is slipping. Politicians who once guarded him are now hesitant. Advisors are struggling to contain his reactions. Lawyers are drowning in overlapping cases. And the public, above all, can see the unraveling. They can feel it. They are watching a downfall unfold in real time. And while Trump insists he will rise above it, the law is indifferent to his confidence. The seizures will continue. The auctions will come. And unless he pays the judgment in full, the liquidation of his empire is only just beginning. This isn't speculation. This isn't political theater. This is the unavoidable reality of a civil judgment that has reached the enforcement stage. And once enforcement begins, it almost never stops until the debt is fully satisfied. For Trump, this may be the moment that defines the rest of his life. Not the rallies, not the presidency, not the headlines, but the collapse of the empire he once believed was untouchable. And as the story develops, property by property, seizure by seizure, the world is watching to see just how far this unraveling goes. If you want to stay ahead of every twist, every seizure, every auction, and every political shockwave this creates, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. This saga is nowhere near over, and the turns coming next might be even more intense than what we've already seen. Stay tuned, stay locked in, and I'll keep you updated on everything that happens next. Don't forget to like the video, drop a comment, and subscribe for more breaking updates. This is only the beginning.